And now the day is slowly drawing to a close. The noise grows quieter. Thoughts slow down. And it's time for storytelling. But before we begin, let's do one small but important thing. If you enjoy learning new things, if you enjoy listening to stories before bed, and if you want to come back again, subscribe to the Hamster NBC channel and like this video. This way, you'll help us create even more kind stories and clear explanations for children all over the world. Now, get comfortable. History is waiting for you. Dwarf Nose Part 1. The Boy and the Witch. Welcome to Hamster NBC, the premier children's news and stories with humor and easy-to-understand explanations. With you, Pears the hamster and Mark the royal corgi. And today we begin a great story that children heard many years ago and will now hear in a new way. This tale comes to us from ancient times. It's about courage, patience, and how looks may change, but the heart never does. Far beyond the city walls, where the market bustled from morning until night, lived a boy named Jakob. He was kind, inquisitive, and loved helping his mother. Every morning, Jakob stood behind the fruit and vegetable counter. He smiled at customers, answered politely, and always tried to be helpful. Pears quietly says that this was the boy. Adults immediately. Mark nods and adds that such children don't usually seek adventure, but rather find it. One day, when the sun was high and the market was especially bustling, a strange woman approached the stall. She was short, hunched over, with a long nose and sharp eyes. She examined the vegetables for a long time, shaking her head discontentedly. Everything was wrong. Everything was improper, and she didn't truly like a single vegetable. Jakob politely offered to help. He had no idea that this day would change his life. The woman suddenly ordered him to bring the basket and follow her. Her voice was quiet, but there was a strange power in it. Mark whispers that, in fairy tales, this is always a disturbing moment. Pears agrees, and says that sometimes politeness leads to unexpected doors. Jakob followed the woman, unafraid. He felt as if he were simply helping a customer. They walked out of town, past gardens and fields, until they came to an old house. It stood crooked, as if worn by time. It was dark inside, and the scent of herbs and smoke filled the air. The woman suddenly changed. Her eyes sparkled, and her voice became harsh. She turned out to be a witch. She ordered Jakob to help her around the house, cook, clean, and learn new things. At first, the boy thought this would only last for a short time, but days passed, and escape was impossible. Pears explains that sometimes the most frightening thing in fairy tales isn't the screams or thunder, but the wait. Mark adds that it's patience that makes a hero strong. The witch was strict and capricious. She constantly criticized Jakob, but secretly taught him how to cook amazing dishes. Jakob learned to cut vegetables perfectly, cook soups with unusual flavors, and memorize recipes no one else knew. A lot of time passed, though Jakob didn't feel it. He grew, learned, and changed. One day, a witch decided to punish him. She cast a spell, and the world seemed to turn upside down. When Jakob looked at himself, he saw a completely different person in the reflection. His body had shrunk, his back had hunched, and his nose had elongated. Thus, Dwarf Nose was born. Mark sighs quietly, and says that this is where the hardest part begins. Pears adds that appearances can deceive, but they don't determine destiny. And here, our story pauses, because ahead lies a return to a world where no one recognizes Jakob, and the beginning of his long journey back to himself. Dwarf Nose Part 2, The Path to Yourself. The story continues where we left off, with Pears, the hamster, and Mark, the king's corgi again. Our hero's journey becomes especially difficult. Jakob woke up outside, under the open sky. The witch's house had vanished, as if it had never existed, and the familiar city lay all around. But when he knocked on the door, no one recognized him. His mother looked at him with fear and sent him away, thinking she was seeing a strange dwarf. Mark quietly says that it's the saddest moment when your home becomes a stranger. Jakob realized that to the world, he was no longer the boy he once was. He had become Dwarf Nose, and now he had to learn to live anew. He wandered the streets, hungry and tired, until one day he smelled a familiar scent. It was the smell of food. Real, well-cooked food. Pears smiled and said that talent always finds a way. Mark added that even in the strangest circumstances, skill can save one. Jakob approached a large house where the city's best chefs worked. He asked for a chance. At first, they laughed at him. No one believed a small dwarf could be useful in the kitchen, but when Jakob began cooking, the laughter disappeared. The knife in his hands moved precisely, and the dishes were unusually delicious. Very soon, the whole city was talking about Dwarf Nose. He was invited to work in the Duke's palace. Mark, with an air of importance, says that the palace kitchen is almost like a kingdom. Pears agrees, adding that taste and order reigned there. At the palace, Jakob became the head chef. He prepared dishes that delighted everyone, except one person, the Duke himself. The Duke was capricious and loved rare dishes. One day, he demanded a special treat, something Jakob had never seen before. Jakob was at a loss. He didn't know the recipe, and for the first time in a long time, he felt fear. But fate decided to help him. In the palace, he met a goose named Mimi. She spoke with a human voice and turned out to be an enchanted girl. Pears explains that in fairy tales, such encounters are not accidental. Mark adds that help comes when the hero is ready to accept it. Mimi knew secret recipes and understood magic better than anyone else. She told Jakob about an herb that could break a witch's spell. This herb grew far away and was very rare, but there was no other way. Jakob decided to take a risk. He realized that if he wanted to regain his former self, he would need patience and courage. The journey was long, but he didn't give up. Every step brought him closer to hope. Mark says that sometimes the path to oneself is longer than the path home. Pears nods and adds that it is on the road that we discover who we are. Jakob found the herb. It was humble and inconspicuous, but it concealed great power. From that moment, fate began to change. But the final decision was still ahead. And here we pause again, because in the next part, the denouement awaits us, the return of our true self, and a lesson that stays with us forever. If you listen to this story before bed, let it remind you that even when the world doesn't recognize you, your skills and kind heart remain with you. In the next episode, we will find out whether Jakob will be able to break the curse and who he will become after all the trials. Dwarf Nose, Part 3. Return and Wisdom. We are together again with you, Pears the hamster, and Mark the royal corgi. And today, the story comes to its conclusion, calm and important. Jakob returned to the palace with a rare herb. He knew the decisive moment lay ahead, and there was no longer any doubt. He carefully added the herb to the dish he was preparing for the Duke. The kitchen filled with a soft aroma, as if magic itself had awakened. The Duke tasted the food and was satisfied. At that very moment, the witch's spell began to fade. Jakob felt the world around him change. His back straightened, his steps became lighter, and his reflection in the mirror revealed his former face. Dwarf Nose disappeared. Jakob was himself again. Mark joyfully says that this is the moment to applaud. Pears smiles and adds that true miracles come quietly. But the story doesn't end there. Jakob remembered Mimi the goose, who helped him without asking for anything in return. He prepared a dish with the same herb for her. When Mimi tasted it, the spell disappeared, and a girl appeared before everyone. She thanked Jakob, and they both realized that kindness always returns. The Duke was amazed. He rewarded Jakob and allowed him to return home. When Jakob knocked on his door again, his mother immediately recognized him. This time, not by his face, but by his voice and gaze. Pears quietly explains that the heart recognizes before the eye. Mark nods and says that this is the warmest moment in the fairy tale. Jakob stayed at home. He continued to cook, but now he did it for joy, not for praise. He became wiser, calmer, and more considerate of others. He knew the importance of not judging by appearances. The story teaches us a simple truth. Appearances may change, but character and good deeds always remain with us. Sometimes trials shape us into who we are meant to be, and that's why they appear in our lives. Mark says, "This is a story about patience." Pears adds that it's a story about the importance of remaining true to ourselves. And now that the journey is complete, we can safely close this book. If you listen to this story before bed, let it remind you that kindness and hard work always find their way back, even if the journey seems long. In the next episode of Hamster NBC, a new story awaits you, new characters, and another story that's pleasant to listen to in the soft light of night.